Welcome. Hi, I'm Rick Durfee, and this is
Mike Koberlein.
And we're here today to talk a little bit about the proposed sovereign wealth fund. And we're going to actually relate that to some other things on a personal level that might be powerful for people to think about. The proposed sovereign wealth fund is basically an investment fund that would be owned and operated by the U.S. government and that would enable it to invest in things. And in my own personal thinking, I remember as a young man looking at people that had stuff that were successful economically, and I realized that people that were doing well financially usually had investments, and the investments paid income of some kind, and they could either build more wealth or use that to live on or support their family. And I've often thought, why don't institutions do that? Why don't schools do that, or hospitals, or governments? And some nonprofits do. They'll have an endowment fund or a reserve, and that enables them to perpetuate their mission. But why don't governments? Because it seems like governments live hand to mouth. Only way they get money is taxation, or I guess they can inflate the currency, or devalue the currency, which is a form of indirect taxation. But they tax people and they spend it. They tax people and they spend it. Why don't they have some kind of investment that produces an income independent of taxation, so they don't have to be taking money from people who produce? That idea has gained the attention of a lot of powerful people, including our current President Trump, that has proposed this sovereign wealth fund. Now there's some issues, some pros and cons, some good things and some potential bad things, and we're going to talk about that today.
Yeah, I mean it's not necessarily a bad idea to want to invest money and to allow it to grow. You know, just like in our own personal lives, that's a good thing to be able to do that. When we were talking about it a little bit earlier, the challenge that I have with it is similar to some of the thoughts I've had about this idea of a joint venture. You know, the government being a partner with private companies, and what that would look like. And to me, it makes me a little uncomfortable just thinking about the government stepping into the role of a private entity or a person and partnering with other organizations and what that could look like in terms of corruption.
Well, yeah, you're onto something, because the government, we can reward our friends and punish our enemies. We can invest in people and things we like, and we can not invest in things we don't like. So it creates a playing field that's not level. If you have government funding, you have an advantage in the marketplace. If you don't, you're at a disadvantage. So then if you can do that, you can manipulate markets, you can pick the winners and the losers, and maybe that's good, but maybe it's bad. And I guess if we were omniscient and wise, infinitely wise, and could always pick the right winners and avoid the wrong losers, then maybe that would be good. But I just don't have a high level of confidence that the people who are running the MVD and make us stand in line for hours are the right ones to pick winners and losers.
Yeah, and I mean, the other question becomes, if you were to have this kind of investment fund that the government essentially runs, is it going to be the government that is investing the money, or is it going to be the government that chooses a private company or a private party that will then invest the money? And if that's going to be the case, then how are they going to go through that process of choosing who does that? Because that's going to be a huge fun. That's going to be a huge.
Yeah, selection of who gets the benefit of this investment, but also, wait a second, have we seen other instances where the government's put money into organizations, non-governmental organizations, and then they become an agent of the government to do bad things that would otherwise be illegal for the government to do? Could the target investments become the same way? On the other hand, there are cool things that the government could do. Maybe the government could buy TikTok. That's been floated. Maybe this is where we get the money to acquire, purchase whatever we're going to do with Gaza and turn it into the Middle Eastern Riviera. And maybe there's other things medically or technologically that the government could support that would really be good if we can just avoid the risk of corruption and inappropriate exploitation.
Yeah, and you'd mentioned earlier automating all of this and what that would look like. Just automating the ability to be able to invest and to see what's going on as far as taxpayers go. You know, if the government is going to have this investment fund, what's going on with the money and where is it going? And my thought was, well, that would be awesome. I love government transparency and the idea of that, but the question then becomes, well, if you do that on a high level and you automate it, does that make it more vulnerable to being hacked.
So yeah,
that sort
so
of thing.
are we going to depend on bureaucrats to divulge information that makes them uncomfortable to the politicians who are getting payola on the backside from what the bureaucrats are doing, so then the taxpayers never sees the reality? Or can we use technology where that kind of transparency is real time? We can see where the money's going, what's happening to it, and everybody can go check it out and investigate it and dig up. You said it was being used for one thing and it's being used for another. If we could find out that level of transparency may help mitigate some of these horrendous potential downsides of such a fund, maybe.
And I mean, if that works, why not do that with all government budgets?
Whoa! Where we can see what they're
There's
doing with the
A
money.
little more accountability.
So we can find out if they say, hey, this really important social program is going bankrupt because we don't have enough money, and it turns out it's being siphoned off to do other things that are actually, we're going to send the money to our enemies who want to kill us and are going to use the money to destroy our legal system and our constitutional rights. Some of the corruption that we're discovering that's coming out in the news right now is really uncomfortable. So could this same kind of thing, if you've got a private enterprise that's capitalized with government money, and then private people are running it, who's going to be on their payroll? What congressional member is going to be on the board of directors that's getting payola, or what community is building? Oh, we'll give you government funding if you'll build your factory in our state or our city. I just see a lot of room for abuse, but maybe transparency could mitigate that.
I would love to see that. And you had mentioned earlier, to kind of dive into something related, that this kind of mirrors the way that families operate and some of the questions that families have and some of the things that we can do to help through estate planning and
Yeah, so
those kinds of things.
as you know, we do this dynasty of estate planning, and we see this 4-generational cycle that is talked about in a book called The Fourth Turning, which is kind of interesting, where one generation makes it, the next generation enjoys it, the third generation it's gone, and by the fourth generation we're starting over. There are ways that can be disrupted. There are actually families that have successfully turned out really high quality people and sustained and grown wealth for many, many, many generations, while others are living hand to mouth. And one of the things they do is they have capital resources that are not spent. They're preserved and they're protected and they grow, and they provide family members with access to capital so they can go out and do entrepreneurial things and make more money. So the issues we see on the macro level, politically and nationally, also occur on the micro level in families. And the same kind of corruption opportunities happen because one generation comes along and they go, yeah, I can't do what grandpa did or grandma did and make all this money, but I'm grateful for their money and I'm going to really enjoy it to the most. And then they ruin their lives and they ruin their marriages and the money's gone.
Yeah, well, the whole idea is that started somewhere, and the question is, how's it going to continue on, or is it going to continue on? How's that going to affect the subsequent generations? And to me, I mentioned that I met with somebody who retired. He's got plenty of money. He's getting more than what he needs to live on. And so he could just sit around and do nothing, but he's decided that he wants to build a legacy for his family, and he wants to be productive, and he wants to use the talents and abilities and the skills that he's developed over multiple years of working to contribute to the community around him and to his family. And so we talked about some of the ways that he could go about doing that.
So it's interesting. In the last few weeks, I've worked with 2 families that they're not exactly the same. There's a lot of differences. And by the way, both families have really quality people, people that I like and that I've known for a long time. And they both families sold a business for a lot of money 30 years ago. And so I'm now working with generation 3 and 4 and have watched what's happened. And in one family, there was a big pile of money, and here 30 years later, the pile of money is about 2/3 of what it once was. And it's not growing, and they're taking the money, and they're going to just do whatever they want to with it. And candidly, not only is the money going to be gone, but so are the people. There are fewer people in the family today than there were 30 years ago, which is kind of weird. The other family, on the other hand, the big chunk of money that they got 30 years ago has doubled a couple of times. It's way bigger now. And oh, by the way, their family members are getting professional degrees. They're in, some of them are, highly compensated professionals, and some of them, in fairness, maybe have lower paying jobs, but they're productive human beings. They're doing good things, and we see that a lot of the family members, not all of them, but have been able to tap into the family's capital to build their own wealth independent of this central pool of money that the family has. So I think if we can do it the right way on the macro level with the government, we have the potential to have that kind of beneficial outcome. If we do it the wrong way, we'll end up in the same place we've been with the current scandal of non-governmental organizations getting tons of taxpayer money to support our enemies.
Yeah, it's really troubling to think about that. And at the same time, it's great to think about what the opportunities are to climb out of that and be able to say, okay, enough of that. Let's move on and let's take the high road and build something better for years to come in America.
So are we fatalistic here? Is it random? Is it the roll of the dice? We might get a good outcome. Yay! We might get a terrible outcome. We're screwed. Or can we be deliberate about it? And I tend to favor the idea that we can be deliberate, we can be intentional, we can produce the positive outcome that we want if we move in that direction. And hopefully we can figure that out nationally. Hopefully we can figure that out as a human race on the whole planet. And hopefully we can figure that out in our families.
I've always thought about that as something that, what's within my control. What's within my control is within my sphere of influence, which is in my family and in my community where I'm at. I can't necessarily change the entire nation, and frankly, I don't know how a person does that. I personally believe it is one family at a time, and that we can influence things in that way. Kind of a grassroots effort. But when it comes to the change that we're talking about, macro level change, how is that done? And I think we're seeing some of that.
I really like your perspective that it's done one family at a time. And it's interesting because we do this dynastic estate planning. And I've been telling people for decades, structure your estate and your money like this. Well, now all of my children are adults. And they push back. So those are real challenging issues, but kind of like the you want to change the world, clean your room thing that we're hearing from some high-profile people today. Maybe if we want to change the world, let's get our families in good shape.
So I got to tell a story of my 4-year-old. I was at a store with him the other day, and we were walking through, and I was looking for something for my wife for Valentine's Day, and he picked up this fake phone that was like candy. And he's saying, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And I'm like, no, we're not getting that stuff today. And so I said no. I went and paid for what we got. And we're walking out of these sliding glass doors to go to the parking lot to get to our vehicle. And he's kind of like tearing up a little bit. And he's like, I just don't understand why you can't buy me things. It's really easy. All you have to do is slide a card.
Yeah, like it doesn't cost you anything.
And I was like, well, if you're gonna get stuff, you're gonna work for it. And so even though I could have bought that, and it would have been fine, being able to instill in him this sense of, I got to work for things. I need to be productive. It's something that I feel like needs to be done early on. And obviously I buy him stuff.
Sure.
But it was just one of those times where it was like, no, we're not going to do that this time. We're here for another reason.
That's a great story. I love that story.
He's such a funny kid.
So, this is Rick Durfee.
Michael Koberlein.
And we've enjoyed being with you today. The Sovereign Wealth Fund on the macro national level and your personal family bank type of structure for your multi-generational family planning. The same ideas apply to both.